Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Today on Earth Focus, can climate change be profitable? And can business adapt? Oxfam's John Jacoby speaks with Link TV correspondent Miles Benson on climate change and what it means for the business community. Coming up on Earth Focus.
Mr. Jacoby, until now, the notion has been spread that the business community has been the primary obstacle to making the kinds of policy changes we need, we say we need, the scientists say we need. You see that changing at all?
The big picture for the business community now is picking sides, and there are companies that have stood in the way consistently of climate change and energy legislation, and we knew to expect this. And you have trade associations, for example, that have consistently shown skepticism about specific legislation to address this enormous global problem that has huge impacts on developing countries. But increasingly what you're seeing are fault lines drawn in the business community because very well-known and progressive companies are coming out in favor of emissions reduction targets as well as adaptation to climate change. So to give one example, you have a coalition known as BICEP. It's a clever one. It's the Business for Innovative Climate and Energy Policy Coalition. And the BICEP coalition is composed of major brands that all Americans know. You have eBay, Levi's, you have Nike, Starbucks, Sun Microsystems, and others. And these companies have banded together to support climate change legislation that's in line with the science. And we can't argue with what the scientific consensus is that we've never had in human history. So many scientists say that we are going to need to curtail our carbon concentrations in the atmosphere by significant degrees by 2020 midterm targets and by 2050 with our long-term targets. And so this coalition has been very vocal up on Capitol Hill and with the administration, and is showing that business can be part of the solution and not just part of the problem. And in particular, where we've been working closely with them as Oxfam is on the challenge of adaptation to climate change in developing countries. We see drought increasing across parts of sub-Saharan Africa. We see glaciers melting in the Andes. We see water challenges across Central America. This affects not only the communities we work with as a humanitarian organization, but there are companies that see tremendous challenges in their supply chains as they try and import coffee or cotton or assemble apparel, for example, in areas that are prone to floods, such as Bangladesh. So there is a business case to be made for being very forward-looking in terms of both mitigating our greenhouse gas emissions and then also helping adapt to climate change. So this is where the business community can come into play and be a helpful and constructive voice.
Those corporations you mentioned are big, strong corporations, but isn't it true that most of the muscle is arrayed on the other side right now?
There is a tremendous force of opposition in this country led by certain elements of the business community. But what you do see, in addition to the companies I mentioned, you have a number of other major companies in major emitting industries. You have Duke Energy as a major utility. You have GE as a major industrial conglomerate. You have Ford as a major auto company. They're all assembled into another coalition called the U.S. Climate Action Partnership, equally robust in calling for legislation that would address the problem and be part of the solution. There are multiple coalitions out there, some of them more far-reaching than others in terms of what they want from policymakers, but there is now a critical mass of companies that are calling for not only strong legislation in the U.S., but a global deal in Copenhagen.
So right now capital is pretty tight, but for those who have it and are looking for a place to put it, and they want to be part of the green revolution, where are some good bets for them?
The future opportunities for investment for private equity firms, for venture capital firms, for hedge funds, especially as the government starts to signal its own investment in renewable energy and getting us on a low carbon path, are these energy efficient technologies and renewable energy technologies. And we will see increasing investment as the public sector and the private sector work together to coordinate that investment, because the scale of the challenge is enormous. We don't have a lot of time, and the profit, the signals for profit are enormous, but we don't yet have a price on carbon. So the market is waiting to figure out exactly how much it can invest, because it doesn't have the proper market signals until we pass climate legislation in the U.S.
Are the benefits of adaptation and the requirements of adaptation going to be enough to offset the damage done by the dislocations to the economy caused by climate change?
There are two ways in which the business community sees opportunity. One is on the main focus of reducing emissions, which is known as mitigation. And then on the other hand, you have this aspect of climate change where we're already seeing the impacts in both in the US and in the developing world and in other countries. And this is what's known as adaptation. And the business community has already seen that there are opportunities and risks in this question of adaptation to climate change. So, for example, you have companies that are worried about their supply chains. You have Starbucks worried about the quality and the quantity of the coffee that they're importing into the United States. For Levi Strauss or for Nike, various apparel companies, they're concerned about their cotton that goes into the products. And so the risks that climate change poses to developing countries then becomes a business risk for those companies. However, they see opportunities then to address and make more sustainable and more resilient the communities that are producing that coffee and that cotton for their supply chains. And that's where we see opportunities to marry the other businesses that are out there that do water management, that do insurance, that deliver products and services that can help communities build resilience. And that's an aspect of building the green economy that doesn't get a lot of focus but certainly deserves it.
When you talk about mitigation and you talk about adaptation, are you really talking about reduction in consumption in this country?
The American way of life is, you could say, challenged by the climate change debate because we need to take a critical look at the products we use, the way we generate energy, and the impact that it has on the environment. And what the economists will call it is that we're looking to internalize the externalities. That for a long time we've been, in a sense, underpricing the goods and services that we consume because those externalities, those negative effects on the environment haven't been priced into our products. And so that may mean in the short term we will have to pay more for energy in the short term to get onto a more sustainable and renewable source of energy. But those costs, and there will be costs, are in the short term going to be not as onerous as has been played up by the business community that is opposed to climate legislation. For the price, the cost of energy will increase by the price of a postage stamp per day for every American, as was research done by in preparation for the House of Representatives bill on climate change. And so this is then a question of, will Americans be willing to pay a bit more to build in a more sustainable model for production? And will companies be able to lead the way in signaling to consumers, we are giving you a product that will last longer, that will be made with more renewable and efficient sources of energy, and that consumers understand how this is crucial to the long-term benefit of both the economy and the environment, even if it means paying a bit more in the short term. And more companies are looking to convey those messages to consumers, but there's also a lot of smoke and mirrors out there, and so consumers need to sort through a lot of information to get to the truth.
Can you quantify the consequences of mitigation in terms of job losses in this country, for example, and quantify, on the other hand, the amount of job gains from the adaptations and some of the related mitigation efforts?
This is a challenge to try and quantify the amount of what we would consider green jobs or clean energy jobs, is often termed here in the United States. And there are numbers. I've seen 1.7 million jobs to be created in the area of reducing emissions that will help us get on a low-carbon path.
This is the mitigation.
That would be on the mitigation side. On the adaptation side, it's been a challenge for us so far to quantify, but what we've been able to do is at least do an assessment across the United States of 7 different sectors of the economy that could benefit from adaptation opportunities and create jobs in those realms. And water management would be one area. Consulting and information services is another. For example, you have GIS mapping to help figure out where landscapes are likely to change as a result of climate change. There's a business opportunity for firms in the U.S. and elsewhere that deal in that.
Jonathan Jacoby, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world. To learn more, visit linktv.org.